This tutorial is a project of nonprofitaccountingbasics.org, a free resource developed by the Greater Washington Society of CPAs Educational Foundation. Our goal is to encourage accuracy and accountability to help smaller nonprofits successfully manage and sustain their organizations.
I'm Patty O'Malley of Rubino and Company. Once an organization has been created with the intention of becoming a nonprofit, it creates a series of requirements on both the federal and the state levels for the organization. This session is going to focus on one of those requirements, and that's the annual filings with the Internal Revenue Service. And in particular, we're going to talk about the Series 990 forms. But before I get to the forms, I would like to talk about a few items that you really need to pay attention to. With very few exceptions, almost all of exempt organizations must file an annual information return with the IRS each year. Now, the exceptions, which include churches, are important, and you need, before you get started on the forms, to take a minute to look at the instructions for the Form 990 or talk to your tax advisor so that you'll know what form is appropriate for you or if you actually need to file. Second, like other forms for the IRS, if you don't file on time, you'll be assessed a penalty, and if the penalties aren't paid in the time given, you'll have interest that you'll also be paying. I'll talk about due dates a little later in this presentation. Third, if you don't file for whatever reason, and in particular if you don't file for 3 consecutive years, it will result in you losing your exemption. It's an automatic revocation, and the only way to become exempt again is to go through the reinstatement process that the IRS has given to accomplish that. This can be a very expensive and time-consuming process, so you may want to take the step back and have some sort of procedure in place that will allow you to make sure that you meet your requirement. There's also penalties for an incomplete or inaccurate return. In this case, it's really important as you prepare the form to make sure it is complete, but also that it's very informative and that it shows your organization in the best light. In addition to the penalties, you need to know that your forms are public documents. They're going to be published on the web. Organizations such as GuideStar.org or some of the state charities officials will post these and make them widely available to everyone. They're used by funders and others, so it's important to put your best foot forward. The first 990 is the 990N, and this is for the smallest organizations. It's defined as those that normally have $50,000 or less in gross receipts per year. There are 2 terms here that are really important. Normally is defined in the slide that you'll see on your screen, and it's dependent upon how long your organization has been in existence. Gross receipts, on the other hand, are not to be confused with gross revenues. There are more items included in gross receipts, more amounts than would be included in your gross revenue. Such things as the gross proceeds from the sales of investments are included in gross receipts. You do not net any expenses when doing this calculation. The 990N is not a form in the traditional sense. It's called an electronic postcard because the only way to file this is through the web, online. There are 2 ways to do this. You can access it through the IRS website at www.irs.gov or directly through epostcard.form990.org. It's a small form. There are only 8 data points requested, and there's such items as the name of the organization, your EIN or employer identification number, and a principal officer. So it's a very quick form to complete and easy to do. The next level of form is the Form 990EZ, which is considered the short form. This is for organizations with less than $200,000 in gross receipts and less than $500,000 in assets. The core form is 4 pages. It includes information such as financial activity, your board members, your highest compensated employees and independent contractors, and program descriptions. In addition, you may need to file an additional 8 schedules, but you only file these if you have the activity. So it's very likely, if you're a charity, you'll be completing Schedule A, which is the public support schedule. If you have lobbying, you'll be looking at Schedule C. And if you're going to liquidate, you would go to Schedule N. If you don't have that activity, you do not complete the schedule. And finally, there's the Form 990. This is a very large form, and it is very intensive in the type of information that is requested. It is often very likely that your auditor prepares this for you, and if you're going to do it yourself, you may consider having somebody review it who prepares a lot of the forms. This form, the core form, is 12 pages, and it includes all the information that's in a 990EZ, but it includes more extensive amounts of information on some of the same topics and then more. For example, for compensation of your most highly compensated employees, you have to show the information 2 ways. In one schedule, it's on a calendar year basis based on W-2s, and in another, it's on your fiscal year basis based on your books and records. In addition to the core form, you have 16 schedules that potentially could be filled in. These include the 8 that were discussed under the 990EZ screen, but also include such items as additional information about your financial statements on Schedule D. Schedule I includes grants and other assistance to organizations and individuals in the United States. Schedule I includes grants and other assistance to organizations and individuals within the United States, while Schedule F talks about your activities outside the United States. A big form that is included here, or schedule, is Schedule R, and this relates to your related parties, and those tend to be organizations. I have 2 other 990 series forms that I'd like to discuss with you. The first is the 990PF, which is the filing for private foundations. No one else completes this form except for private foundations. And the thing you need to know about this is that it applies to all foundations regardless of their size. There's no separate EZ form for them. And the 990T is for unrelated business income. This is not an information return, it's actually a tax return. If you have unrelated business income, you're required to complete it if you go above the threshold. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about it. As for due dates, all of these returns are due by the 15th day of the 5th month after your organization's year end. You're allowed 2 extensions, and both are filed on Form 8868. The first is an automatic 3-month extension, which has to be filed by the original due date. The second 3-month extension is not automatic. You have to have a reason submitted for why you're extending the return. And it's due by the expiration date of the first extension. So for example, if you have a December 31st year end, the due date is May 15th. The first extension would expire on August 15th, and the last extension, the second one, would expire on November 15th. The only exception here is for the 990T, and that extension is for the full 6-month period. So you only file once. Thank you for your attention.